Chapter 1261. Within this area, all of the air would become a part of his body, and he would be virtually unkillable. On top of that, he would be able to maximize the effectiveness of his control abilities. However, at the same time as he unleashed his domain, Tang Wuling had already turned toward him, and a massive golden dragon projection appeared behind Tang Wuling's body. This was an enormous and ferocious golden dragon that was far clearer than the golden dragon projections Tang Wuling had conjured up in the past. Its eyes were filled with deranged ferocity, and the air around Tang Wuling was abruptly ignited. There even seemed to be flames erupting out of his eyes. On top of that, Tang Wuling's original 5 golden soul rings had suddenly increased to 6, and in contrast with the 5 previous golden soul rings, this one was tinged with a crimson color. What was even more terrifying was that Tang Wuling's scales and other 5 soul rings had all been illuminated into the same crimson golden color by that 6th soul ring. As soon as Hu Tao's blinding domain attempted to approach his body, it would be incinerated into nothingness. In the next instant, another thunderous dragon's roar rang out, and all of the beast soul master, who were already quite feeble, were all flattened onto the ground. Even several of the mechas in the air had plummeted out of the sky, and Tang Wuling released a halo of crimson golden light that encompassed everyone on the battlefield, regardless of whether they were friend or foe. A crimson golden world had been created around him, and everyone within this world was also struck by bloodlust and a desire for slaughter. The same inexplicable expression appeared in everyone's hearts. Golden Dragon Infernal Massacre. The golden dragon behind Tang Wuling had become completely crimson in color at this point, and even in his air form, Hu Tao felt a burst of astonishing killing spear intent directly into his mind. As a hyper Douluo, he possessed quite a high level of spiritual power, but he was still quite far away from the spirit domain realm. In the next instant, he felt as if his entire mind had turned crimson, and the surrounding air no longer heeded his command. The giant crimson dragon had filled the entirety of everyone's field of view, and it didn't seem to have the ability to discriminate between friend and foe. Thankfully, its true target was Hu Tao. A burst of crimson flames erupted into the air, and Hu Tao didn't even get a chance to cry out before he was incinerated into nothingness. Immediately thereafter, a vast expanse of darkness appeared within the crimson flames, and it was as if hell had truly descended upon this world. The one who was affected the most by this was Yuan and Yui. In the face of the golden dragon Infernal Massacre, her titan giant ape faded on its own, and she transformed into her fallen angel form. She was looking at the crimson dragon in the distance with a fanatic look in her eyes, and at this point, Tang Wuling had already completely disappeared. The giant crimson dragon was the only thing that stood in his place, and it whipped its powerful tail violently through the air, sending it crashing viciously into the Spirit Pagoda building. Black and crimson patterns spread forth, and the midsection of the Spirit Pagoda suddenly seemed to have become extremely soft. All of the construction materials in that section of the building quickly melted away, and the top half of the Spirit Pagoda slowly began to teeter off to the side. Everyone had been completely rooted to the spot, even the rest of Shrek's 7 monsters, as well as Sima Jinkai and Arahang. Prior to this day, none of them had imagined that Tang Wuling would possess the power to kill a hyper Douluo on his own, and even destroy an entire Spirit Pagoda branch. Was he really only a 7-ring soul sage? In the distance, Li Yang was also looking on in a completely flabbergasted manner. Cold sweat began to trickle down his forehead. He knew that he was slightly more powerful than Hu Tao, but due to the special nature of Hu Tao's martial soul, he wouldn't actually be able to do anything to Hu Tao in battle. However, in the face of the crimson dragon that was Tang Wuling, Hu Tao seemed to be so powerless and vulnerable. It was incredible that a hyper Douluo and a branch chairman of the Spirit Pagoda had fallen just like that, but the truth was right before his eyes, so he had no choice but to believe it. The crimson dragon raised its head and let loose another thunderous dragon's roar, sending a burst of crimson light sweeping toward the Spirit Pagoda soul masters down below. All of the soul masters who came into contact with this light were quickly reduced to puddles of blood. All of Tang Wuling's companions were at a complete loss for what to do. Prior to this day, Tang Wuling had never killed anyone aside from evil soul masters, and the violent emotions he was displaying finally alerted everyone to the fact that something was wrong. Had he lost control over his own emotions? It was undoubtedly the case that the near-death condition his father was in had dealt Tang Wuling a massive blow, but even as his closest friends, none of them knew what kind of state Tang Wuling was currently in. We can't let him keep killing like this. The more he kills, the more his emotions will run rampant. Sima, let's work together to stop him. Xiaoan, use your control abilities to restrict him. All right. Everyone immediately sprang into action, with Arahang and Sima Jinkai charging directly toward Tang Wuling, while Xu Xiaoan raised her staff to release streaks of shimmering starlight toward Tang Wuling in an attempt to control him. However, her starlight abilities, which had been completely infallible up to this point, didn't affect Tang Wuling at all. He continued on his rampage without any pause or respite, and right at this moment, Arahang's body expanded drastically as he rushed forward and wound his arms around the crimson dragon. However, the power emanating from the crimson dragon's body was simply far too enormous, and the crimson flames burning over its body made Arahang feel as if even his soul had been set alight. As such, he was only able to hold on for a moment before he was forced to let go with an agonized cry. Sima Jinkai and the others hadn't even reached Tang Wuling yet, but they could still feel the devastating aura of the crimson dragon crashing down toward them. At this point, the remaining few tidal Douluos of the Spirit Pagoda had already fled the scene. Even the air Douluo was no match for this deranged dragon. They naturally had no chance, either. What do we do? We have to request assistance from the Tang sect. Perhaps the Holy Spirit Douluo can control him, Yue Tangyu said in an urgent voice. None of them dared to approach Tang Wuling, but they could all sense the overwhelming grief emanating from his body. Having known Tang Wuling for so long, all of them were naturally aware of the situation regarding Tang Wuling's family. His parents had disappeared when he had only been a small child, and now that he had finally been reunited with them, his father had been pushed to the brink of death. All of the emotions he had repressed for well over a decade had erupted forth at once, and it seemed to have triggered some kind of transformation. Everyone had always known that Tang Wuling's Golden Dragon King bloodline was extremely powerful, but they didn't think that he would become this fearsome after undergoing an emotion-fueled transformation. In the face of the ferocious attacks from the Crimson Dragon, all of the weaker Spirit Pagoda soul masters were killed in less than a minute. After that, the Crimson Dragon began to attack the Spirit Pagoda building itself, and it was being ravaged like a ragdoll. Such a grand and majestic building was quickly being reduced to rubble. Sirens had already rung out across the entire city, and the officials of Spirit Wave City had naturally taken notice of what was going on. Through some of the advanced surveillance devices in the air, they were able to monitor the situation from afar. That Crimson Dragon was far too formidable. Even Hu Tao had fallen to it in an instant. There was a Dou Spirit Empire mecha squadron comprised of 100 mechas stationed near the city, but most of them were yellow mechas. They certainly didn't dare to approach such a fearsome being. Chapter 1262. Life was precious, and no one wanted to toss it away for no reason. The situation unfolding in Spirit Wave City had already been reported to the royal family of the Dou Spirit Empire, and everyone was awaiting further instructions from them. At this point in time, no one could do anything about this Crimson Dragon, and Shrek's 7 monsters were all feeling extremely flustered and concerned. All of a sudden, a rift opened up in the air above the Crimson Dragon, following which a silver figure emerged. The figure had a head of long silver hair that spilled all the way down her back, and a pair of purple eyes that were filled with urgency. Arahang and Sima Jinkai's expressions both changed slightly upon seeing this. Could this be a powerful being from the Dou Spirit Empire or Spirit Pagoda? They were just about to rush forward to face her, when Xu Xiaoan suddenly exclaimed, "Naya, is that Naya?" "Who's Naya?" Arahang asked. "Wulian's sister." Just as they were speaking, Yuna had already descended from the sky and spread open her arms. Water, fire, earth, wind, light, darkness, space. 7 types of elements erupted from her body, and it was as if she were the adored child of heaven and earth. Silver scales appeared all over her skin, and her body rapidly expanded in size, transforming into a giant silver dragon in the span of just a few breaths. The first part of the silver dragon to descend was its tail. It hooked its tail around the Crimson Dragon's tail, then grabbed onto the Crimson Dragon's back with its claws. Its tail then continued onward, winding itself tightly around the Crimson Dragon's body. At the same time, the silver dragon spread its wings before wrapping them around the Crimson Dragon's wings. The Crimson Dragon struggled violently, and the crimson flames burning over its body quickly charred many of the silver dragon's scales black. But the silver dragon was extremely determined and refused to release the Crimson Dragon no matter what. At the same time, a layer of silver light emanated from from its body to envelop both itself and the crimson dragon. The air above them began to take on a rainbow color, and within this rainbow color, two more colors emerged, gold and platinum. The silver scale hanging around the crimson dragon's eyes lit up, and at the same time, the light emanating from the giant silver dragon's body became brighter and brighter. The crimson dragon's struggles gradually became more feeble, and the crimson flames around its body also began to recede. However, its scales were still of a crimson golden color, and a faint sigh rang out as the giant silver dragon reached out with a set of claws, digging them under a scale situated just under the crimson dragon's neck, then tore off the reverse scale with one powerful motion. The crimson dragon let loose a furious roar, but the crimson color staining its scales finally receded, and they reverted back to their normal golden color. At the same time, the dragon's body began to quickly shrink, and its deranged and devastating aura faded away thereafter. The silver dragon raised its head to the heavens and let loose a thunderous roar, instantly destroying all of the surveillance devices in the air above. It then raised its head and turned toward Shrek's 6 monsters with a complex look in its eyes before flapping its wings, vanishing into the spatial rift with the shrinking golden dragon still firmly in its grasp. Everyone on the scene felt as if they had just witnessed a dream. Arahang wore a blank expression as he mused. His sister is so powerful. I can't believe she was able to subdue him so easily. The crisis should be averted now, right? Meanwhile, Sima Jinkai seemed to be more astonished than everyone else as he focused his gaze on the spot where the silver dragon had just disappeared. He had already been stunned by Tang Wulin's almighty golden dragon king bloodline, yet somehow, he could sense a dragon aura from the woman's body that was no weaker than Tang Wulin's aura. Who was she? Let's get out of here first, Yu Xingling said in a decisive manner. Tang Wulin had been taken by Du Yuna, so he wouldn't be in any danger. At this point, the Spirit Pagoda branch had already been reduced to a pile of rubble, so there were definitely going to be hordes of people from all sides arriving on the scene soon. As such, they had to get out of here as quickly as possible. After all, despite how weak the Dou Spirit Empire was, it was still an empire. At this point, all of the surveillance devices had been destroyed, so no one knew what was happening. The surveillance images had become warped and twisted ever since Du Yuna first appeared, so the only ones to have witnessed her arrival were Shrek's 6 monsters, as well as Arahang and Sima Jinkai. Of course, there was also Li Yan, who was appraising the situation from afar. Li Yan had already prepared himself to step in, but even he didn't have any confidence in his ability to control Tang Wulin. After all, that crimson dragon had been far too fearsome. As such, he was very relieved by this turn of events. If the crimson dragon had been left unchecked, the situation would completely spiral out of control once the Dou Spirit Empire military arrived on the scene. Tang Wulin was the current Tang Sect master, as well as Shrek Academy's Sea Gods Pavilion master, so his actions here would reflect very badly on both of those organizations. Thankfully, that mysterious woman had managed to take him away, and it seems that they shared quite a close bond. In any case, everyone had been stunned by the battle that had just taken place. In the eyes of Li Yan, Tang Wulin had been elevated to a higher level altogether. However, at the same time, he was quite perplexed. Just what was that terrifying, uncontrollable power? Furthermore, how had the Tang Sect allowed him to become the Sect master given the volatile nature of that power? Unbeknownst to him, the Tang Sect and even Tang Wulin himself hadn't been aware that this power had been lurking within his body. Kill, kill, kill. Tang Wulin's entire spiritual world had taken on a crimson color, and his mind was entirely filled with endless thoughts of slaughter. He felt as if he had entered an ancient battlefield and was surrounded by enemies in all directions. He had already transformed into a giant dragon and had gone on a killing rampage. Countless demons and devils were rushing toward him from all sides. They had corkscrew horns on their heads and bodies that were covered in scales, and as he tore these creatures apart, his golden scales were being stained by their blood. This blood made him even more violent and powerful, which fueled him to kill more and more enemies. Thus, he no longer cared that his body was being stained by blood, and he continued to indulge in slaughter and destruction. The joy of destruction took over his heart and soul, and he felt as if this world of slaughter was the only place where he could truly express himself. His mental state was slowly being warped, and even his mind had taken on a crimson color. Deep within his heart, there was an urgent voice that was constantly calling out to him, but that voice was far too feeble for him to pay it any heed. The sight of his father's grievous wound had tipped him over the edge, and all of the negative emotions that he had been repressing had erupted forth at once. Only through destruction and slaughter could he assuage these negative emotions. Thus, the voice of reason faded further and further, and a giant golden dragon appeared in Tang Wulin's mind. The dragon's eyes were completely crimson in color, and were filled with ferocity and tyranny. The dragon possessed unfathomable power, and it was constantly injecting this power directly into Tang Wulin's mind, making him more powerful, but also eroding his sense of reason. His 12th golden dragon king seal had been broken without him even noticing, and the enormous surge of energy from the broken seal combined as one with his desire for destruction. Furthermore, the terrifying giant golden dragon in his mind was directing his power toward the 13th golden dragon king seal. After receiving the enormous influx of energy from the 12th golden dragon king seal, the golden dragon within Tang Wulin's mind had already become clearer. A fearlessly overwhelming aura was emanating from its body, and its power was constantly elevating Tang Wulin's aura, allowing him to better destroy and release the pain in his heart with reckless abandon. This was undoubtedly an extremely exhilarating process, but it also gradually made him lose himself. Just as the 13th seal was about to come undone and Tang Wulin's mind was about to become a sea of crimson, a burst of powerful restrictive force suddenly bound him from all directions, stopping the golden dragon in his mind cold in its tracks. Immediately thereafter, red, yellow, blue, green, golden, black, and silver light formed 7 giant chains that surged directly into his mind to bind the giant golden dragon. A cold aura surged into Glabella, and under its stimulus, Tang Wulin finally awakened slightly from his trance of slaughter and destruction. He was slightly disoriented and reflexively paused, upon which the cold aura instantly spread throughout his body, cleansing it of the violent tendencies that had been corrupted by. Chapter 1263. The giant golden dragon within his mind struggled and thrashed with all its might, but all to no avail. With the injection of that cold aura, Tang Wulin's boiling blood gradually subsided, and layers of rainbow light surged into his body, causing the crimson color in his mind to recede. He gradually calmed down, and the cold sensation seemed to have frozen his mind as well. The energy that was surging toward the 13th golden dragon king seal also gradually receded. At this point, cracks had already appeared on the 13th seal, but thankfully, everything was stopped before it became too late. Tang Wulin gradually regained control over his senses, and he felt as if he had just woken up from a vivid dream. He was extremely groggy and disoriented, and the world around him had fallen completely silent. At this moment, he felt as if he was submerged in a pool of cool and refreshing water, and he gradually fell into a slumber amid the nourishing embrace of this pool of water. After an indeterminate period of time, Tang Wulin finally woke up again, and in his half-asleep state, he was struck by a strong sense of hunger. He instinctively wanted to eat or drink something, and when he unintentionally came into contact with something that was soft and warm, he immediately latched onto it and reflexively began to devour it. A cool and refreshing aura emanated from that warm and soft place, and that only further spiked his yearning and desire. His senses gradually returned to him, and the soft and flawless body in his arms filled him with boundless satisfaction and pleasure. He reflexively tightened his arms around that alluring body and continued to express his desires with reckless abandon. A burst of urgent panting suddenly rang out, and right at this moment, a bone-chilling sensation spread through his chest, dousing the flames in his heart and also abruptly jerking him completely awake. In the instant he opened his eyes, he felt as if time had completely stopped. He was greeted by the sight of a set of exquisitely beautiful blushing features, and the purple eyes looking back at him were filled with boundless allure. If it weren't for the cold sensation constantly pouring into his body from his chest, his blood would most likely instantly be ignited once again. Strands of silver hair were draped all over his chest and face, and they carried her unique fragrance. She was right on top of him, and their bodies were completely intertwined. What came as an even bigger shock to him was that neither of them were wearing any clothes, and they were adhered against one another in the most intimate possible way. There was a beseeching look in her eyes, and she pleaded, "You can't. Please stop. If we do that, your domain will be activated again, and if that happens, I won't have the power to repress it again." Tang Wulin folded slightly, and only then did he discover that his arms were firmly locked around her body. He bit down onto the tip of his own tongue, using the pain to inject a hint of clarity into his own mind. However, when he looked at her again, the intense visual stimulus immediately threatened to set his blood alight again. "Don't look." He abruptly closed his eyes and pushed her away. He was extremely reluctant to do so, but his respect for her and his trust in her judgment outweighed his own reluctance. As soon as their bodies parted, Tang Wuling was greeted by the sound of loud labored panting. Elemental fluctuations erupted in the surrounding area, and after separating from that alluring body, he felt as if all of his strength had been sucked away. Only now could he truly assess his own bodily condition, and he was immediately struck by a sense of intense agony that speared through his entire body. He felt as if he had been torn to pieces, then crushed into mincemeat. Even with his superhuman pain tolerance, he couldn't help but let loose a muffled groan, and cold sweat began to beat up on his forehead. He felt as if his body no longer belonged to him, as if every single cell of his had been torn apart. He was so feeble that he couldn't even move a single finger. With his incredible self-regenerative ability, this was a completely unprecedented situation for him. In the past, even if he were to suffer severe injuries in battle, he would be able to recover in a short time, but on this occasion, he was not so lucky. His consciousness gradually returned to him, and he finally recalled some things. His final memory was of his battle against the powerful beings of the spirit pagoda, and after that, his mind was infiltrated by that sea of violence, which was where his memories were cut off. However, even now, he could still recall the joy of expressing himself with reckless abandon through destruction and slaughter. He forced himself to ignore his own extreme physical discomfort and peeled back his own eyelids. In his mind, there was something more important than his own bodily condition. How was father? Had he survived? When he opened his eyes again, he was greeted by the sight of Dou Yuna, who had already sat up and conjured up a suit of blue ice armor around herself. However, the ice that the suit of armor was constructed from was semi-transparent, so the alluring outline of her body was still somewhat visible to him. However, his concern for his own father outweighed his carnal desires, and he hurriedly asked, "How's my father?" "Father?" Dou Yuna faltered momentarily before asking, "What happened to father?" Tang Wuling's hands balled up into tight fists, and intense hatred appeared in his eyes. There were members of the Holy Spirit cult in the Spirit Pagoda. Thus, he gave Dou Yuna a brief recount of everything that took place within the Spirit Pagoda, and Dou Yuna's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. "No, father won't die. We'll go back together and save him." Tang Wuling was rather taken aback by the fact that Dou Yuna was also referring to his father as father, and a peculiar look appeared in his eyes. "Who are you? Are you Naya or are you Gu Yue?" Tang Wuling tried to struggle into a sitting position, but the intense agony in his body prevented him from doing so as he was forced to lie back down with another muffled groan. "Don't move." Dou Yuna hurriedly made her way toward him before pressing her hands against his shoulders, injecting gentle water elements into his body to soothe his pain. "You can't move right now. Just as you said, the beautiful silk tulip and the others have already taken father away, and with the Holy Spirit Douluo's treatment, there's a very good chance that he'll be saved. The beautiful silk tulip and the others still haven't returned, so they're most likely contributing to treating father. What you need to do now is worry about yourself. Your condition is extremely bad, and I have to help you repress your condition. Otherwise, you could easily return to your former state. Hence, you have to make sure to calm yourself down." Tang Wuling immediately flared up with rage. "My father is almost dead. How am I supposed to calm down? Dou Yuna, I really can't take this anymore. I did everything in my power to respect you and consider your feelings, but why can't you tell me who you are? Do you know how much it hurts me to be kept in the dark like this?" Dou Yuna faltered slightly upon hearing this, and she bit down on her lower lip as she continued to inject water elements into Tang Wuling's body. Only after a long while did she finally murmur, "Do you really want to know?" Tang Wuling insisted, "Tell me." Dou Yuna took a deep breath before giving him a firm nod. "Right now, I'm Naya." "Naya?" Tang Wuling's mind went completely blank upon hearing this. Did that mean that the person he had just been kissing was Naya? He had always thought that Dou Yuna was still Gu Yue, and this revelation had truly stunned him into silence. A series of complex emotions welled up in his heart, and he was at a loss for words. However, Dou Yuna then said something else that snapped him back to reality. "Before this, I was Gu Yue." Tang Wuling turned to her in a perplexed manner, awaiting a further explanation. Chapter 1264. To put it more accurately, we were always the same person. Have you heard of split personalities, big brother? Dou Yuna asked with sorrow in her eyes. Tang Wuling faltered slightly upon hearing this. Split personalities? Dou Yuna nodded in response. "When I was still very young, I experienced a personality split due to some special reasons, and that was when I split up into two personalities. Gu Yue is my main persona, while Naya is a subsidiary persona that was born due to that personality split. As a result of this, I lost my memories and became Naya, and I was picked up by you. Hence, I grew up under the love and care of you, father, and mother, completely oblivious to the fact that I was a split persona. After that, Gu Yue found me and helped me recover my memories, but at that point, my personality had already taken shape, and I had developed a strong sense of independence, which conflicts with my main persona. As a result of that, I almost had a mental breakdown, and in the end, my two personas could only coexist alongside one another, rather than fuse back as one. Gu Yue didn't understand why I was so determined. In her eyes, once the main persona awakens, the subsidiary persona should automatically fuse back with the main persona. She tried to make that happen in the past, but during the process, she discovered that a lot of her personality traits were going to be assimilated by Naya, which would cloud her future judgment and affect her ability to complete her ultimate goal. As such, she was unable to fuse with Naya in the end. As the two personas grew up alongside one another, Naya became more and more independent, and through some special methods, the two personas became two separate people, which were Naya and Gu Yue. Gu Yue was very curious about you, and she didn't understand why Naya was so fond of you. She didn't believe in our relationship, so she made a bet with me. She said that she would adopt an ordinary physical appearance and approach you to try and get you to fall in love with her. If you do, then that proves your feelings toward me are fake. If I lose, I have to give up all resistance and fuse as one with her, whereas if she loses, she has to allow me to fuse with and change the main persona. Tang Wuling was already completely rooted to the spot. He had always been very curious about just what kind of relationship Gu Yue and Naya shared, and how they had become Gu Yuna, but never did he think that the answer would be something so far-fetched. To call this story incredible was an understatement. It was like a fairy tale. Gu Yuna continued, "In the end, I lost during the Sea God Fate matchmaking convention. Your love for Naya was only love for a sibling, not a romantic love. It made sense, considering we were only together during our childhood. I didn't want to admit defeat. If I could have constantly lived with you, I was sure that I would have been able to make you fall in love with me, but in the end, I still lost." She suddenly smiled as she spoke, and it seemed that she wasn't in any pain over the fact that she had lost the bet. "I lost, but Gu Yue didn't win, either. She made you fall in love with her, but in the process, she fell in love with you as well." The smile on Dou Yuna's face gradually became rather bitter at this point. Only following the conclusion of the Sea God Fate matchmaking convention will we able to truly understand one another. At that point, her main persona and my subsidiary persona no longer opposed each other. At that time, I was content to fuse as one with her as I knew that her love for you wouldn't change. No matter what happened, there was only a single person that the two of us would be able to love. At the time, I had thought that I would be destined to disappear, to become a part of her. However, she didn't completely devour my persona. Instead, she kept me in a corner. After saving you and losing her memories, our two personas communicated once again, and only then did I understand why she did that. She was afraid that you would be sad if Naya disappeared. Her love for you is even deeper than I had imagined. Tang Wuling's heart trembled upon hearing this. Then what about her? Where is she now? Dou Yuna sighed. "Do you recall that battle in the abyss? In order to save you from that holy lord of the abyssal plane, she incinerated her own main persona. Otherwise, there was no way the two of you would have been able to unleash enough power to force back a planar ruler through your dragon god transformation. She wanted to sacrifice herself and completely hand over our body to me so I can be with you without any inhibitions. She's such an idiot. We are two parts of the same whole, and just like how there's a part of me in her consciousness, there's a part of her in my consciousness as well. Hence, I protected her consciousness, and she went into hibernation to recuperate. She should be able to reawaken once I become a titled Douluo. But even now, I still don't know how I should face her. She's simply too stubborn in certain areas, and there are some things that we have to face together. That's why we can't be with you." Tang Wuling couldn't help but ask, "What is she so fixated on? Can't she face those issues with me by her side?" Naya took a meaningful glance at Tang Wuling. "So you still love her in the end?" "I'm so mad, big brother." Tang Wuling faltered slightly upon hearing this, and he didn't know what to say. "It's best that you didn't know. Otherwise, you would only be in even more pain. As for how the future is going to pan out, everything will have to wait until she reawakens. However, there's something that I must caution you about right now. Just like how you've always been very curious about my relationship with Gu Yue, we've both been very intrigued by your Golden Dragon King bloodline. According to our observations, that's the true power of the Golden Dragon King, not just some bloodline inheritance. It's just that the Golden Dragon King's power is too enormous, so it's been sealed up within your body in many parts, and gradually gets released as your cultivation rank progresses. Hence, it's the reason why you've been able to become so powerful, but it'll also bring you a lot of peril, just like the power of the Silver Dragon King that Douluo and I inherited. The past Dragon God led all of the beast gods on a war against the human gods, and this is naturally because humans and soul beasts have always had their differences, but also because of the Dragon God himself. When the Dragon God became a god, he possessed his own godly power, and the god seat that he inherited was that of destruction and creation. Those are the most fundamental powers in the universe, and the Dragon God came into contact with some of it by chance. The influence of the god seat that he inherited was relatively minor, but this was still the most fundamental power of the universe, which is why he was so powerful. In terms of pure combat prowess, the Dragon God was more powerful than any of the 5 godly monarchs. However, the universe is fair, and these enormous powers do not come for free. The power of creation is an extraordinary thing. It can create life, and it created the most powerful dragons that once roamed the Douluo continent. However, at the same time, the power of destruction is extremely fearsome. The conclusion of creation is destruction, and the conclusion of destruction is creation. The two exist alongside one another in a synergistic yet conflicting relationship, and as a result, the Dragon God himself also possesses 2 personas, just like with me and Douluo. However, he faced a far more severe issue than me and Douluo, as his 2 personas completely opposed one another, and they were just as powerful as each other. The godly power of creation is governed by the Dragon God's wisdom and sense of reason, while the godly power of destruction is governed by a more deranged facet of his personality. To put it in simpler terms, the Dragon God has a wise persona and a deranged persona. Back when the Dragon God was slain and split up into the Golden Dragon King and Silver Dragon King, the latter was allowed to go free, while the former was sealed in the divine realm as it's the deranged persona of the Dragon God. We have no idea how its power was transferred into your body, and you've constantly been benefiting from it, growing far more powerful than your peers. But in reality, you've never grasped the core of the Golden Dragon King's power, which is insanity. In its insane and deranged state, the Golden Dragon King is a destructive force of nature, and it's virtually invincible. Chapter 1265. In that last battle, you finally tapped into this core element of the Golden Dragon King's power as you were tipped over the edge by your hatred. Hence, you displayed ultra-powerful combat prowess, and also unleashed the Golden Dragon King's most fearsome domain. Within this domain, all slaughter and destruction would become fuel for the Golden Dragon King, which means that the more it kills and destroys, the more powerful it would become until it laid waste to the entire planet. If you become completely possessed by this insanity, then you'll become the blind killing machine that is the Golden Dragon King, and its tool will devour your consciousness. In a sense, you'll be possessed by the Golden Dragon King. Tang Wuolin drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. Gu Yuna's analysis was even more accurate than old Tang's insights. Never did he think that his fit of rage would have almost resulted in him being possessed by the Golden Dragon King. That was downright terrifying. Gu Yuna wore a solemn expression as she continued. The only reason why I was able to awaken you is because you're still not powerful enough, and you only just began your descent into insanity. If you had indulged in destruction for a while longer, or if you were more powerful than you currently are, then even I would be completely powerless. When that time comes, you'll go on a rampage of constant destruction. Without any infusions of the power of creation, you'll destroy the entire planet, and perhaps even the entire universe, until you yourself are destroyed. Destructive power that isn't kept in check by the power of creation is the most fearsome thing imaginable. Tang Wuolin asked, then what should I do? Gu Yuna replied, you have to keep your own emotions in check no matter what. Don't let your negative emotions consume you, and don't engage in excessive slaughter. Also, try not to release your Golden Dragon King power anymore. Once you release the entirety of the Golden Dragon King's power, you'll be consumed by insanity no matter how powerful you become, and you'll be possessed by the Golden Dragon King. Tang Wuolin's brows furrowed tightly upon hearing this. The problem is that as time passes, the seals in my body will become undone on their own, and I won't be able to control them. Gu Yuna nodded in response. I'm aware of that. Gu Yue and I possess the power of the Silver Dragon King, which is the Dragon God's power of creation. Once we reach a certain level of power, perhaps we'll be able to help you control the seals. However, we're definitely still unable to do that now. Hence, I'll give this to you for now, and I'll discuss the matter further with Gu Yue once she reawakens. Gu Yuna flicked her wrist as she spoke, and a ball of blue light hovered over to Tang Wuolin. She then made a hand seal, and the silver dragon scale around Tang Wuolin's neck immediately lit up. The blue ball of light landed on the silver dragon scale, and bright light instantly began to radiate from the scale, turning it a dazzling platinum color as opposed to its original silver color. An extremely cold sensation surged into Tang Wuolin's body, striking him with an indescribable sense of comfort. His rampant blood essence and even the agony he was experiencing all abated significantly, but his body also became slightly stiff from the cold. This is an ice god bead. After fusing it into my reverse scale, the two will be able to help you keep your emotions in check. Using its glacial power to subdue your violent tendencies will also benefit your cultivation. Some of the ice in front of Gu Yuna's chest melted as she spoke, and she looked down at the golden scale hanging around her neck as she continued. I've taken your reverse scale. This reverse scale contains the most potent violent tendencies, and without it, the Golden Dragon King's insanity won't be able to completely awaken. The rhomboid golden scale was very angular, and there seemed to be a tiny dragon head on its tip. It hung in front of Gu Yuna's fair skin, creating an entrancing sight to behold. Tang Wuolin couldn't help but stare, and a blush appeared on Gu Yuna's face as she yelled, "What are you looking at?" Despite what she was saying, she leaned forward and wound her arms tightly around Tang Wuolin. As a result, the icy sensation surging through his chest became even more intense, and a layer of ice and frost appeared over both of their bodies. As this cold sensation infiltrated his body, Tang Wuolin was struck by a strong sense of exhaustion, and he quickly fell into a deep sleep. 2 days had already passed since the incident, and Li Yan was still struggling to come to terms with what had happened. The terrifying image of the giant crimson dragon laying waste to the spirit pagoda had become deeply embedded in his mind. A hyper Douluo had been erased from existence in that battle, virtually without being able to offer any resistance. Furthermore, less than a third of the people in that spirit pagoda branch had managed to survive, and the only ones who did were the people who had run away the fastest. The destruction of the spirit pagoda branch had created a massive stir throughout the entire Dou Spirit Empire, and Spirit Wave City was placed into a state of complete lockdown. With Li Yan's lofty status in the Dou Spirit Empire, it was naturally an easy task for him to protect Tang Wuolin's companions, and nor did he have to worry about being investigated. But the image of the giant crimson dragon continued to loom over his heart like a persistent shadow. He couldn't forget those deranged and vicious eyes, and just the recollection of the dragon's fearsome aura sent chills running down his spine. Those were clearly all signs that Tang Wuolin had completely lost control. In that state, he could have most likely put up a good fight even against the limit Douluo. It was naturally a good thing for the Tang sect that the sect master possessed such incredible power, but if he couldn't control that power, then it would become a harbinger of disaster. It was extremely inconvenient for the Dou Spirit continent to contact the Douluo continent. A special device was required, and an extremely large amount of resources had to be expended. Furthermore, this communication could only take place in Heaven Dou City. Li Yan was far too busy dealing with the aftermath of this incident, so he still hadn't had a chance to contact the amorous Douluo. What made him even more concerned was that Tang Wuolin seemed to have gone missing. He still didn't know exactly what was going on. All he had heard from Tang Wuolin's companions was that something seemed to have happened to his parents, and that they had discovered members of the Holy Spirit cult in the Spirit Pagoda. The Tang sect had always suspected that the Spirit Pagoda was colluding with the Holy Spirit cult, and now there was finally concrete evidence. It was now beyond a reasonable doubt that the Spirit Pagoda had to have played a hand in the bombing of Shrek Academy and the Tang sect headquarters. However, none of this stunned him as much as that giant crimson dragon did. Not just him, but everyone who had been present to witness that terrifying rampage definitely wouldn't be able to forget that image for as long as they lived. The Dou Spirit Empire's royal family had initially been very displeased that Tang Wuolin hadn't gone to Heaven Dou City right away, and dealing with them had been quite a headache for Li Yan. However, ever since the Spirit Wave City incident, the royal family had fallen completely silent. Li Yan had told them that the Tang sect master had some private matters to attend to in Spirit Wave City, and that he would be paying the royal family a visit after that. Due to how important the Tang sect was to the Dou Spirit Empire, they accepted this arrangement, even though they were clearly very displeased. However, after hearing about what had happened to the Spirit Pagoda headquarters in Spirit Wave City, the royal family naturally couldn't help but fear for the worst. After all, there weren't many powers in the entire empire capable of destroying the Spirit Pagoda headquarters. The Tang Sect master had only just arrived in Spirit Wave City before this incident took place. No one was going to believe that the Tang Sect had nothing to do with this. Of course, Li Yan vehemently denied any Tang Sect involvement in the incident, but the royal family had formed their own conclusions and fallen into complete silence. Li Yan didn't know whether this was a good thing or not. He didn't know if they had intimidated the royal family or if the royal family was now wary of them. Everything would have to wait until Tang Wuling returned. The official statement being released by Spirit Wave City was that they were doing everything they could to track down the perpetrators, and the remaining members of the Spirit Pagoda were busy salvaging whatever they could, but it would be virtually impossible to repair the Spirit Pagoda. The only option would be to rebuild it. However, all Spirit Pagoda branches of this scale had Spirit Ascension flames, so the rebuilding process would definitely require an astronomical sum of money. Chapter 1266. From this perspective, Li Yan was actually taking a lot of vindictive pleasure in the Spirit Pagoda's misfortune. The Spirit Pagoda had been involved in the destruction of the Tang Sect headquarters, so he wouldn't feel any sympathy toward them even if their entire organization were to be eradicated. However, none of this answered the pressing question of when their sect master was going to return. Ever since Shrek 6 monsters had returned from the site of the incident, they had stayed in the hotel the entire time. Furthermore, they had brought back some people, and they were all in the hotel as well. Even the members of the Tang Sect had no idea what they were doing. I can't just keep waiting like this. I have to report this matter to the amorous Douluo and request further instructions from him. Regardless of whether it was the discovery of evil soul masters in the Spirit Pagoda or the destruction of the Spirit Pagoda headquarters, both were extremely important pieces of news that had to be reported back to the Tang Sect. In particular, he had to notify the amorous Douluo of the deranged state that Tang Wuling had flown into. With that in mind, he immediately rose to his feet and pulled out his soul communicator. He contacted his subordinate in Heaven Dou City to set up intercontinental communication right away and prepared to set off for Heaven Dou City. When he emerged from the hotel, there was already a car waiting for him outside. Yet just as he was about to get into the car, he was suddenly struck by the feeling that the air around him had cooled slightly. As a hyper Douluo, he instantly reacted to this and reflexively cast his gaze toward a certain direction. There, a man in white activewear was making his way directly toward Li Yan. He wore a hat, and his head was slightly bowed, so his features were obscured. The cold sensation was emanating directly from his body. This wasn't an actual change in temperature. Instead, it was an invisible aura that couldn't be felt unless one were to reach a certain cultivation rank. The man raised his head and cast his gaze toward Li Yan, and Li Yan almost blurted out the word Sect Master. The young man in the hat was none other than Tang Wuling. The suit of white activewear complemented his tall and athletic figure, accentuating his muscular arms, slim waist, and long legs. His eyes were as bright and clear as a starry night sky, and there was no longer any hint of insanity within them. Tang Wuling didn't appear to be walking very quickly, but it only took him a few steps to reach Li Yan. It was as if the air around him had become more sluggish. Sorry to make you worry, Hall Master Li. Is everyone in the hotel? Tang Wuling asked. They are. They haven't left the hotel ever since they returned. Sect Master, you. Li Yan unconsciously lowered his head toward Tang Wuling as he spoke. In the past, he had only respected Tang Wuling as he had the support of the Holy Spirit Douluo, but now, he had developed a hint of fear toward Tang Wuling, and he had clearly discarded his conceited demeanor. Even though this Sect Master was extremely young, he had just killed a hyper Douluo with ease a few days ago. The only adjective that Li Yan could think of to describe him was unfathomable. Tang Wuling nodded in response. Apologies for all of the trouble I've caused. I'll come to find you later. After that, the surrounding air seemed to grow sluggish once again, and Tang Wuling vanished from his field of view. Li Yan turned toward the entrance of the hotel in a slightly slack-jawed manner. Was that the power of a domain? Tang Wuling hadn't adopted any disguise, and there were many passers-by on the street, but none of them had paid him any notice despite his exceptional looks. It was as if he had entirely become one with the surrounding space itself, as if he didn't even exist. No, this isn't the effect of a normal domain. This is a spiritual domain. Li Yan still hadn't reached the spirit domain realm, but he was a hyper Douluo, after all, and had witnessed spiritual domains in the past. In a sense, the domain that Tang Wuling had just displayed was the most profound spiritual domain he had ever seen. He couldn't exactly pinpoint what the effect of the domain was, but one thing was for sure in his mind. Tang Wuling was more powerful than he had been a few days ago, and not just by a little bit. Tang Wuling strode into the hotel, and he reflexively began to assess his surroundings. His calm facade wavered slightly as he strode forward once again, and in the next instant, he appeared on the second floor. It was as if space and time could no longer bind him. After waking up again, he discovered that Diyuna had already left, and she had only left him a note, telling him to look after himself. However, when he laid a hand over the platinum dragon scale hanging around his neck, he could sense her existence, and that she was situated somewhere not far away. It was just that he couldn't teleport himself to her side as she could. Perhaps that was because he didn't have a sufficient grasp on spatial elements. The pain in his body had already vanished. His incredible regenerative abilities had allowed him to make a full recovery in just a day and a night. Even though his meridians were still aching, this pain was within his tolerance threshold. The platinum dragon scale was releasing a faint cool aura that cleared both his mind and his heart. Tang Wuling discovered that his body had undergone considerable changes. His mental capacity had expanded by over a third, and his spiritual power had also become more viscous, clearly indicating a qualitative change. The insanity of the Golden Dragon King had almost thrust him onto a path of destruction, but it had also allowed him to break his 12th Golden Dragon King seal. He had clearly made a breakthrough in his spiritual power, and his spiritual domain had already been completely consolidated. However, due to the excessive increase in spiritual power in too short a time frame, his control was still lacking, which was why Li Yan had been able to sense the changes taking place around him. This was a result of the time warping effect stemming from a lack of control over his own spiritual power. Another thing that he was unable to control was the effect of the Ice God bead. He was still unable to completely conceal the cold aura emanating from it, and that was something that he would have to work on over time. Not only was the Ice God bead able to repress his violent tendencies, it was also nourishing his body in a subtle manner. If the Golden Dragon King bloodline were a scorching flame and the mysterious heaven method was the most neutral and placid soul power, then the Ice God bead would be cool and refreshing water. With the neutralizing effect of this cool aura, the terrifying scorching violence stemming from the breakage of the 12th Golden Dragon King seal was neutralized, thereby resulting in a qualitative change that significantly increased his soul power. His body felt far more comfortable than before, and the negative side effects stemming from the breakage of the 12th seal had also been significantly alleviated. On top of that, his soul power had reached rank 80, and he was now Soul Douluo. At the same time, after the 12th seal was broken, he had attained his 6th golden soul ring. However, he hadn't yet had a chance to examine all of the changes that had taken place within his own body, as the first thing he did after waking up was contact the beautiful silk tulip. His location hadn't been all that far away from the hotel, and all of the plant system great beasts had been nourished by the seed of life for quite some time now, so they could leave his body for a certain period without any repercussions. Through their spiritual connection, Tang Wuling received a piece of fantastic news. His father was now in a stable condition. However, detailed communication couldn't be facilitated through spiritual fluctuations, so he immediately rushed to the hotel as quickly as he could. As for the clothes he was wearing now, they had already been on him from the moment he woke up. Tang Wuling made his way over to the room at the very end of the corridor on the hotel's second floor, then silently pushed the door open. His mother was lying on one of the beds in a deep sleep, while his father was lying on another bed. Tang Xiran's face was quite pale, but he was most definitely breathing. As soon as Tang Wuling caught sight of them, he began to release strong emotional fluctuations. In response, the dragon scale in front of his chest immediately began to glow with a faint platinum light, releasing a cloud of icy mist that enveloped his entire body. Under the stimulus of this cold mist, his spiritual fluctuations were quickly quelled. Following the modifications Diyuna had made, the reverse scale of the Silver Dragon King had combined as one with the Ice God bead, and it was now truly a divine item. The Holy Spirit Douluo was seated on a chair with her legs crossed, and upon sensing Tang Wuling's arrival, she slowly opened her eyes before giving him a slight nod. A shameful look appeared on Tang Wuling's face, and he extended an apologetic bow toward the Holy Spirit Douluo. A burst of gentle white light was released from her body and enveloped Tang Wuling, making him feel as if he were basking in a relaxing hot spring. A hint of surprise then appeared on the Holy Spirit Douluo's face. You attained the spiritual domain? Tang Wuling nodded in response before speaking in an embarrassed manner. Sorry for making you worry, Your Majesty. On that day, the Holy Spirit Douluo merely waved her hand to cut him off. All that matters is that you managed to control it. If I had been in the same situation as you, I wouldn't be able to hold back, either. I'm not adept in battle, but I'd love nothing more than to kill all of those abhorrent scum. A hint of intense resentment flashed through her eyes as she spoke. Chapter 1267. Tang Wuling faltered slightly before immediately empathizing with the Holy Spirit Douluo's words. The collusion between the Spirit Pagoda and Holy Spirit cult meant that the former had undoubtedly played a role in the destruction of Shrek Academy, as well as the death of Yangming. Your father's condition is rather troublesome. You really should thank those plant friends of yours. Your father's life force had almost been completely sucked away by that evil soul master, and he would have been dead for sure had they not used their auras to stabilize his condition. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made it to me. The injury he suffered has been extremely damaging to his body, so he'll need a long time to rest and recuperate, but his life isn't in any danger now. Tang Wuling heaved a huge sigh of relief upon hearing this. He could sense that all of the plant system great beasts were in the neighboring room. His father was going to live, and his mother was also sleeping soundly. The sight of them filled his heart with warm emotions that completely quelled the more violent facets of his psyche. He thanked the heavens for blessing him with this final result. Even though the process had been extremely perilous, the outcome was ultimately a positive one. The Holy Spirit Douluo rose to her feet and made her way over to Tang Wuling's side. Stay with your parents for now. You can come and tell me what happened later. Words cannot express my gratitude to you, Your Majesty, Tang Wuling said in a heartfelt manner as he extended a deep bow toward the Holy Spirit Douluo. Yali sighed. I've saved countless people in my life, yet I was unable to save him. Why must the heavens be so cruel? Come and see me after your parents recover. I have something I want to speak to you about. A hint of grief and sorrow flashed through her eyes as she spoke, and she opened the door before departing from the room. Tang Wuling heaved an internal sigh. Indeed, the heavens had been extremely cruel to Yali and Yangming. The Atlas Douluo had given his life for Shrek Academy, and even his soul had been captured. Tang Wuling could only hope that they would be able to recover Yangming's soul as soon as possible. He made his way over to the side of his father's bed, then knelt down and laid a hand over his father's forehead. Tang Xiran's forehead was slightly cool to the touch, and his aura was clearly far more feeble than that of a normal person, indicating excessive loss of blood essence. Thankfully, his life force was quite stable. It had been over 10 years since he had last seen his parents, and they had all aged noticeably. There were already wrinkles on his father's forehead, and his brows were tightly furrowed. He had sorely missed them during these past years, but they had also been constantly thinking about him. He looked at his father, then turned to his mother before planting a gentle kiss on her cheeks. A wave of emotion washed over him, yet just as tears were about to flow out of his eyes, a cool sensation spread from his chest again, calming his tumultuous emotions. Tang Wuling didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. This ice god bead was indeed an extremely useful asset to him, but at the same time, it had also deprived him of his capacity for emotion. Tang Wuling sat on the chair beside his father's bed and tried to enter a meditative state, but Naya's words were constantly echoing within his mind. She and Gu Yue were two personas of the same person, and Gu Yuna was their true complete form. He loved Gu Yue, but Naya was his sister. He couldn't bear to part with either of them. Naya had said that it was very strange that he had inherited the Golden Dragon King bloodline, but hadn't Gu Yuna also inherited the Silver Dragon King bloodline? In the end, Naya had left instead of choosing to stay with him. She had told him many things on that day and answered many of his questions, but at the same time, even more questions had popped up. For example, just what was holding back Gu Yue? Naya hadn't revealed this information to him. With Gu Yuna's powers, what could possibly be holding her back from being with him, to the extent that she was actively avoiding him, and even feigned amnesia just to be with him. Every time this train of thought appeared in Tang Wuling's mind, his heart was filled with a smorgasbord of emotions. In any case, he had managed to successfully save his parents, and they were both still alive. On top of that, he now understood Naya and Gu Yue's situation much better, and everything seemed to be progressing toward a positive direction. As the expression went, after hitting rock bottom, the only way to go was up. He had to continue to work hard and become more powerful. During the deranged rampage he had gone on, he had almost completely lost himself, but the experience had also enhanced the power of his Golden Dragon King bloodline. This seemed to be a purification process that was changing both his bloodline power and aura in a subtle way. As he circulated his mysterious heaven method soul power and basked in the cool calming sensation provided by the ice god bead, he gradually managed to iron out his own tumultuous emotions and enter a meditative state. One streak of light surged into the room from outside before silently vanishing into Tang Wuling's glabella. After sensing his return, all of the plant system great beasts were also returning to their rightful place. The recent incident had dealt him a very heavy blow and also changed him significantly. He had to spend some time to consolidate all of these changes, and this wasn't a process that could be completed overnight. However, what was undeniable was that he had taken another massive stride. Not only had he advanced significantly in his cultivation rank, the fact that he had broken his 12th Golden Dragon King seal so early meant that the inevitable breakage of the rest of the seals would be delayed. If the Golden Dragon King bloodline really were destined to lead him toward a path of destruction as Gu Yuna had proclaimed, then it was naturally best for him to break the seals as slowly as possible. The next morning, a faint moan jerked Tang Wuling out of his meditative state, and he reflexively turned to discover that his mother was the one who had uttered the moan. She had already turned over, and she was opening her eyes in a groggy manner. However, she then quickly noticed Tang Wuling sitting beside her, and her eyes gradually widened before glowing with joy. Mother. Tang Wuling did his best to lower his voice as he collapsed onto the side of his mother's bed and held tightly onto her hand. Tears immediately began to flow down Lang's face, and her lips quivered as she stared at Tang Wuling with elation and incredulity. On that day, everything had happened so quickly, and she didn't even get a chance to take a good look at her own son. Looking at him now, he had grown up into an exceptional young man with a unique disposition and a set of extremely handsome features. After hearing his heartfelt cry, how could Lang possibly hold back her own emotions? For over 10 years, her heart had been tormented by guilt and sorrow. Back when they had been forced to leave, Tang Wuling had only been 10 years old. At such a tender age, he was forced to take care of himself and take on such a heavy burden. Whenever Lang thought about this, she would weep uncontrollably. She struggled to get up, and Tang Wuling hurriedly helped her up into a sitting position. Lang threw her arms around Tang Wuling, and even though she was already very petite compared to him, she still felt as if she were holding her little boy. In that instant, all of her emotions spilled over, and she burst into loud sobs. Tang Wuling didn't try to stop her from crying. He merely released a layer of soul power that enshrouded himself and his mother so that her sobs didn't disrupt his father. Lang was incapable of uttering even a single word. Only through her tears could she express the multitude of emotions surging through her heart. Tang Wuling also had tears flowing down his face. He basked in the familiar aura of his mother, and even the cool sensation emanating from the ice god bead wasn't enough to repress his emotions. Only after a long while did Lang regain control over her emotions, and she slowly stood up before looking up at Tang Wuling through tear-filled eyes. She appraised him in an unblinking manner, as if she were trying to commit every single detail about him to memory. Mother, Tang Wuling called out in a gentle voice. My son. Lang caught Tang Wuling in a tight embrace as the floodgates were thrown open once again. Chapter 1268. Tang Wuling gently stroked Lang's back and injected his soul power into her body to assuage her grief. After a while, Lang raised her head again and asked in a gentle voice, Wuling, is that really you? I didn't think I would ever get to see you again. It's me, Mother. Don't cry, it's not good for you. We've finally been reunited, so you should be happy. Don't worry, Her Majesty, the Holy Spirit Douluo, just told me that Father will be fine, and all he needs is rest. Lang nodded firmly in response. She had naturally already learned about her husband's condition from the Holy Spirit Douluo. Your father and I are so sorry for leaving you behind for all these years. Not only was she crying for her husband, her heart throbbed even more for her son. They had been forced to leave him back when he was only 10 years old, and 12 years had passed since. Then, every single day of the past 12 years had felt like a year in itself, and she was constantly worrying about how Tang Wuling was going to fare on his own. At the time, Tang Wuling had already displayed some talents in forging, but he was still only a child. After that, she and her husband were finally granted the opportunity to contact home using the long-distance communication facilities in the Spirit Pagoda. This was a benefit that had been granted to them so that they would be more willing to work. However, the communications were constantly being monitored, so they couldn't say too much, and they could only get some information from Tang Wuling's first forging teacher, Mang Tian. When they were made aware that Tang Wuling had made it into Shrek Academy, their hearts had been filled with excitement, but that was greatly overshadowed by pain and guilt. Just how much hardships did a child have to go through to reach this point without the protection of their parents? When they heard from Mang Tian that Tang Wuling was becoming more and more exceptional, they finally saw some faint glimmers of hope. However, they didn't dare to pass on their location to Tang Wuling through Mang Tian. and there was no way the guards here would let them disclose this information. Anyway, Tang Xiran had only managed to inform Mang Tian that they were in the Dou Spirit Empire during a rare opportunity when the guards had been slacking off. Their research had finally bore fruit, and they had thought that they would be released. It had always been promised to them that once they completed their research, they would be granted a massive monetary reward and sent back home. However, when the day actually arrived, they immediately sensed that something was wrong. Those people had no intention of releasing them at all, and Tang Wulin had arrived just in time to see them being executed. If he had arrived on the scene any later, his parents would have most likely been dead already. Just as Tang Wulin had thought, perhaps the heavens had blessed him so that he was able to save his parents in the direst of circumstances. The sorrow in Lang's heart finally gradually faded away, and her breathing began to accelerate as she held tightly onto her own son. She was petrified that this would be nothing more than one of the countless dreams she had had about Tang Wulin. How have you been all these past years, Wulin? Lang finally managed to muster up a complete sentence. Tang Wulin gently wiped the tears away from his mother's face, and replied, I've been very well these past years, mother. Ever since you and father left, I've been constantly cultivating while honing my forging skills. After that, I made it into Shrek Academy, then joined the Tang sect and was nurtured by both the academy and the Tang sect. Upon my insistence, teacher Mang Tian told me about where you two could be, and father once told me that I would have the power to save you two once I became a soul sage. I came to the Dou Spirit continent on behalf of the Tang sect on this occasion, and thank heavens I made it just in the nick of time. He glossed over the past 12 years with a nonchalant recount, withholding all of the details of the hardships and difficulties he had endured as he didn't want his mother to worry. Tears welled up in Lang's eyes again as she looked up at Tang Wulin. He had made everything sound so simple, but she was naturally aware that things couldn't possibly have been anywhere near as simple as he made it out to be. Don't cry, mother. Our family has finally been reunited. I've been waiting for this day for a very long time, Tang Wulin said with a smile. All right, I won't cry. Lang raised a hand to gently stroke Tang Wulin's head, and her heart was filled with happiness at the sight of her handsome and reliable son. I'll bring back some breakfast for you, mother. Wait for me here. I'll be back soon, Tang Wulin said as he gave his mother a hug. He didn't want to leave her even for a single second, but he had to get her something to eat first. On the other bed, his father was still sleeping soundly, and his complexion also appeared to have improved. Lang's gaze remained on Tang Wulin as he walked out of the room, and her eyes were filled with a soft and gentle light. She sat down beside her husband's bed and said, We've finally been reunited with our son, Xiran. Tang Wulin came to the restaurant in extremely high spirits and ordered the most lavish breakfast, not just for his mother, but also for himself. Everything was progressing toward a positive direction, so how could he not be elated? He had already formulated a plan. He was going to take his parents back to the Tang sect submarine so they could rest and recuperate their air, then take them back home once the matters in the Dou Spirit Empire and Douluo Empire had been taken care of. He was going to take them back to the Tang sect headquarters, where it would be easy for him to look after them. His main objective for his cultivation was to find his parents, and now, he had finally completed that objective. What could possibly make him happier than this? The only thing that was still weighing on his heart now was Gu Yuna. Once he settled his parents in the Tang sect headquarters, he was going to set off to find her. With the connection between their silver dragon scale and golden dragon scale, he was confident that he would be able to find her. You're back, boss. An elated voice suddenly rang out, and Tang Wulin turned around to discover Shu Lizzie and Yu Xinglan standing behind him. A smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face at the sight of them. Looks like you're still the one who's most eager for meals. Shu Lizzie patted his own large stomach and chuckled. There's a problem with your attitude if you're not eager for food. I'm glad you're back, boss. Yu Xinglan wore a slightly concerned look on her face. Are you all right, Captain? On that day, Tang Wulin's brows furrowed slightly. I really did lose control on that day. The issue was most likely caused by my Golden Dragon King bloodline. Was I the person who saved you? Yu Xinglan asked. A wry smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face. I don't even know how to explain this to you guys. In a sense, Du Yue and Naya were always the same person, so she should be referred to as Gu Yuna now. Yu Xinglan and Shu Lizzie exchanged a shocked glance upon hearing this. They're the same person? They were clearly two different people. How were they suddenly the same person now? Tang Wulin continued with a wry smile. Even I still haven't completely figured out what's going on, let alone you guys. In any case, she was the one who saved me and helped me repress the insanity in my heart. My emotions ran amok due to the condition my father was in, but I won't let it happen again. Yu Xinglan said, We're just glad you're okay. Having said that, you really were extraordinarily powerful on that day. The image of the almighty Crimson Dragon had been deeply ingrained into everyone's minds, and at the time, Tang Wulin seemed to have been an invincible being capable of destroying anything in his path. Yu Xinglan had always been very competitive and constantly pursued Tang Wulin as her target, but after witnessing his Crimson Dragon transformation, she was struck by a sense of powerlessness. She had a feeling that there was no way she would be able to catch up to Tang Wulin in her lifetime. Shu Lizzie smiled and said, What are you eating for breakfast, boss? The food here is actually quite similar to the stuff you'd find on our Douluo continent. You can even find some dishes here that have already disappeared on our Douluo continent. For example, that chicken sticky rice and lotus leaf is really delicious. You have to get at least 10 of those. A resigned smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face. I don't have to eat as much as I did in the past. You two enjoy your breakfast here. I'm going to take some back to eat with my mother. I really must thank you for helping me save my parents. Yu Xinglan replied with a smile. You're more than welcome. What are friends for? Pass on my regards to your parents. I will. Tang Wulin picked up a large platter in each hand and piled the two platters full with food. He had been separated from his parents for 12 years, and he didn't know if their tastes had changed during this time, so he took a bit of everything. In any case, if his parents couldn't eat it, he would finish everything, so none of it would go to waste. Chapter 1269. Tang Wulin quickly carried the platters upstairs, then opened the door of the room with his foot. Mother, I'm back. What would you like to eat? I got a bit of every. As soon as he entered the room, his voice immediately trailed off as his mother was currently lying on top of his father, seemingly having fallen asleep again. She was clearly still very exhausted from her ordeal. He gently placed the platters onto the table beside him, and as soon as he did that, his body suddenly stiffened. There was something wrong. Even in a sleeping state, his mother's aura shouldn't be this feeble. He instantly rushed over to Lang's side before helping her up. Her body was completely feeble in his arms, and her face was completely devoid of any color. What was even more harrowing was the crimson diagram that had appeared on her forehead. It was the diagram of a ghostly face, and it seemed to be a living creature that was constantly writhing and squirming, creating an extremely sinister sight to behold. Tang Xiran also had the same pattern on his forehead, and his improved complexion had clearly worsened once again. No, no, no. A suffocating sense of horror instantly welled up in Tang Wulin's heart. His spiritual power erupted forth in a frenzy, and he almost instantly tracked down the Holy Spirit Douluo, who was meditating in her room. With the span of just 2 breaths, a burst of white light appeared in the room, and as soon as Yali arrived, she immediately sensed the changes that had taken place in Lang and Tang Xiran's bodies without even requiring an explanation from Tang Wulin. She reached out with both hands, which were enveloped in a layer of gentle white light, then pressed them against Tang Xiran's and Lang's foreheads. The crimson diagrams on their foreheads immediately opened their sinister mouths, as if they were attempting to chomp down on the Holy Spirit Douluo's hands. Yali's expression changed drastically, and she exclaimed, This is a blood demon curse. He's still alive? What is a blood demon curse, Your Majesty? Will my parents be all right? Tang Wulin asked in an urgent manner. Yali offered no response. An extremely serious look appeared on her face, and she encircled her arms in front of her own chest, instantly summoning the white domain that encompassed Tang Wulin's entire family. A layer of pristine holy light appeared over Lang and Tang Xiran, and the white holy light was tinged with a faint golden hue. The light surged forth in ripples, attacking the diagrams on their foreheads while seething their blood essence at the same time. Tang Wulin could only look on from the side. He was a complete novice when it came to healing, so he could only pin his hopes on the most powerful healing system titled Douluo in existence. The sinister ghostly faces suddenly put on derisive sneers, as if they were mocking the Holy Spirit Douluo for not knowing her limits. Ugh, ugh. Lang and Tang Xiran let loose agonized howls in unison, and plumes of blood mist erupted from all of their orifices. Tang Wulin was greatly alarmed by this, but he was completely powerless to do anything. He would gladly pay any price necessary that would grant him the ability to help his parents, but there was simply nothing he could do, and the pain of this predicament made him want to tear his own hair out. Seal. The Holy Spirit Douluo yelled, and a massive angelic projection appeared behind her. This projection was rather similar to Yue's News, except it had 8 wings rather than 6. On top of that, this projection was as pristine white as snow, rather than golden in color, and its beautiful features were filled with boundless mercy and grace. As the angelic projection spread its wings, halos of white light quickly surged into Tang Xiran and Lang's bodies, slowing the rate at which blood was pouring out their orifices. Right at this moment, both of the ghostly crimson faces spoke in unison. Is that you, Yali? Yan Ming is dead, but you're still alive. I've always craved your body and soul. You and Yan Ming destroyed my body all those years ago, and now, you're trying to save these two from me. How laughable. My blood demon curse only requires 1 drop of my blood to have an irreversible effect. Even if Yan Ming were to be resurrected, there's no way he would be able to stop me. Just you wait. I'm going to make you my blood slave for what you did to me. The two ghostly faces then suddenly melted away, and at the same time, Tang Xiran and Lang's bodies both turned bright red. They opened their eyes almost in complete unison, but their pupils were also bright red. Father. Mother. Tang Wuolin roared as he held tightly onto his parent's hands. There was already sweat beating up on the Holy Spirit Douluo's forehead, and the white light being injected into Tang Xiran and Lang's body was becoming brighter and more intense, but it could only just barely repress their worsening condition. I can only keep them conscious for a short time. Say what you have to say now. Yali's eyes were also filled with fury, but it was tinged with pain and resignation. The blood demon curse was simply too powerful, and most importantly, the one who had cast the curse definitely had samples of Tang Xiran and Lang's blood. Furthermore, that man possessed a superior cultivation rank to her. If Tang Xiran and Lang were a pair of cultivators, perhaps she would be able to save them. After all, soul masters possessed far more powerful bodies than normal humans. However, in the current situation, she was powerless to do anything. No, Your Majesty, please save them. I'm begging you. Tang Wuolin implored in a trembling voice. Yali closed her eyes in a pained manner. She was already doing everything within her power. There were naturally more powerful abilities that she could use, but there was no way that Tang Xiran and Lang's bodies could handle such drastic measures. All of a sudden, a familiar voice rang out. Don't force Her Majesty. My child, this is all a part of fate. Tang Wuolin raised his head and was greeted by the sight of Tang Xiran's bright red eyes. They created a rather harrowing sight to behold, but they were filled with a warm and gentle light. Tang Xiran held onto his wife's hand, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Even a few days prior to the completion of our research, I already sensed that they were most likely going to kill us to keep our research a secret. At that time, I was in complete despair, but the heavens smiled down on us and allowed us to see you again before we pass on. You've grown up, my son. You're taller and more handsome than I was in my youth. Your mother and I are both very, very happy to see how exceptional you've become. These past 12 years must have been very hard for you. Truth be told, back when we were first forced to leave you, I already had a feeling that perhaps we would never be able to see you again. At the time, I left you a message telling you to come and find us only after you became a soul sage, and that was actually only to encourage you. Just as I told you all those years ago, there's only one person in this world that you can absolutely trust and rely on, and that's yourself. That has always been the case, and it will continue to be the case in the future, so you must become stronger in order to be able to better protect yourself. The only wish your mother and I have is for you to live a happy life. Father. Tears were streaming uncontrollably down Tang Wuolin's face, and his body was trembling violently at the sight of his parents' remarkably calm faces. The silver dragon scale in front of his chest was releasing a cold aura into his body, but it was unable to repress his overwhelming grief. Don't be sad, Wuolin. Before we go, there are 2 things that we must tell you. You have to listen carefully as this is very important. Tang Xiran's voice suddenly became very serious, and in his dying moments, a sense of unprecedented authority began to emanate from his body. Tang Wuolin's grief receded ever so slightly. Father. Chapter 1270. Tang Xiran continued in a serious voice. The first thing I have to tell you about is the research that we did. There's definitely more than one research center like the one we were in, and we don't know the ultimate objective of this research. Hence, I can only give you my hypotheses. During these past 12 years, we've been constantly researching and developing a special type of medicine. Back in the day, both your mother and I were federal pharmacists, and we also did work in mecha design. When we were captured, we had thought that we'd been abducted for our mecha design skills, but only after arriving in the research center did we realize that we were going to be developing a type of medicine. To put it more accurately, we were developing a part of a type of medicine, and the main effect of this medicine is repression. Repression. Both Tang Wuolin and the Holy Spirit Douluo were rather surprised to hear this. That's right, it's a type of depressant that's specifically designed to repress emotions, and there are also many other research centers conducting similar research and development, but I believe that our research center was the most successful one. This type of depressant is extremely effective, but it's not for use in humans as human bodies wouldn't be able to handle it. The depressant is too potent, and if a human were to use it, they would become so devoid of emotions that they would be reduced to a walking vegetable. Only extremely powerful soul beasts would have a chance of surviving the administration of this type of depressant, so it's most likely the case that this research is targeting some kind of powerful soul beast. That's the extent of my knowledge on this matter. They took away all of our prescriptions, but little did they know that I had already committed all of these prescriptions to memory. I'll recite them now. Make sure to record them carefully. Wuolin. Father, please rest and allow Her Majesty to treat you first. Tang Wuolin said in a grief-stricken voice. There's no time. My life is about to come to an end, and I must pass on this knowledge before I go. I don't know what the Spirit Pagoda plans to do with this depressant, but it took your mother and I, as well as many other researchers, over 10 years to develop it, so it must serve a purpose. With the prescription, you'll be able to better prepare yourselves if the Spirit Pagoda were to attempt to do something with this depressant in the future. All right. Tang Wuolin gritted his teeth and pulled out a pen and some paper from his storage cell tool. Tang Xiran's breathing was beginning to accelerate as he said, Lang, if I miss anything, make sure to fill in the blanks. The prescription consists of. He spoke very quickly, and it was very clear that this information had been ingrained deeply within his mind. A string of medicine names and ratios were being recited in rapid succession, and even though the words didn't mean anything to Tang Wuolin, but he still recorded them as quickly as he could. More and more sweat began to appear on the Holy Spirit Douluo's forehead. This wasn't a sign of excessive soul power expenditure. It was an indication that she was reaching the limit of her control. Tang Xiran and Lang's conditions were simply far too awful, and she had to ensure that her power created a perfect equilibrium with the power of the blood demon curse within their bodies. Otherwise, if either power were to overwhelm the other, they would quickly perish. All right, that's it. Tang Xiran heaved a long sigh of relief, and at this point, a long list of medicines had been inscribed onto the piece of paper in Tang Wuolin's hand. Take a rest, Father. Tang Wuolin gritted his teeth tightly. He had been holding back his tears this entire time so it wouldn't smudge the writing on the paper. Don't cry, my child. Everyone dies eventually. This is simply the natural order of things. Your mother and I are more than content to have a son like you. It's a pity that we won't get to hear your story. After we pass on, you can come to our grave and tell us your experiences during these past 12 years. We'd love to hear it, Father. Tang Wuolin couldn't repress his tears any longer. Tang Xiran waved a hand and continued. There's something else that's also very important that we have to tell you. Your mother and I actually never wanted to tell you this as we couldn't bear the thought of losing you. He turned to Lang with a pained expression as he spoke, and she nearly gave him a gentle nod of encouragement. Tang Xiran took a deep breath, seemingly to strengthen his resolve, then said, You are actually not related to us by blood. Huh? Tang Wuolin was so stunned by this bombshell that even his tears ceased for an instant. Tang Xiran continued with a wry smile. Your mother and I wanted nothing more than to have a son like you. You were so obedient, conscientious, and determined. You were the most outstanding child I've ever seen. Perhaps that's because my judgment is clouded by my bias as your father. But to me and your mother, you are perfect in every way. Even when you were so young, you managed to remain resilient after receiving that defective soul spirit, and seeing that made me immensely proud to be your father. However, what I have to tell you now is that you aren't our son. Back in her younger days, your mother was contaminated by a certain type of medicine during her research, and she lost her reproductive abilities as a result. We picked you up in the wilderness when we were hiking one day. In the instant that we picked you up, both of us heard a voice in our hearts that told us your name is Tang Wuolin, which means you and I share the same surname. Lang took over the story from there. You were so very adorable as a child. You had a pair of large eyes, and your little body was so delicate. I couldn't get get enough of holding you. You were always smiling and never cried, and you were very, very obedient and clever. In the instant that we picked you up, we decided to adopt you. In our eyes, you were a gift from the heavens. Her voice was very gentle, and her eyes glazed over with reminiscence as she spoke. Tang Xiran continued, not long after we took you home, we could already sense that you were different from other children. Back when you were a child, you fell ill very frequently, and regularly had persistent fevers. There were a few times when we had thought that you wouldn't make it, but you pulled through every time and seemed to grow stronger on the other side of each ordeal. Lang continued, you always ate far more than normal children. Your father and I no longer wanted to work in pharmaceutics and mecha design, so it was always hard to make ends meet, but no matter how tired we were from work, we were always filled with contentment when we returned home to see you. You were our psychological pillar, and at that point, we'd even forgotten that you weren't actually our child. Tang Xiran continued, when we first found you, you were completely naked and didn't even have any swaddling around you, but we were both sure that we had heard the voice that had told us your name. Perhaps your parents weren't ordinary people like us. If it isn't for the fact that we're about to pass on, perhaps we would have kept this a secret forever. We're both selfish at heart, and we couldn't bear the thought of losing you. However, now that we have to leave you, I don't want you to have no loved ones in this world. At the very least, you can go and search for your birth parents. When we first found you, we were nowhere near the ocean, but the voice that had told us your name was accompanied by the sound of loud crashing waves. That's the only potential lead that we have on where your parents may be. 2 lines of blood tears slowly flowed down Lang's cheeks. Go and find your parents, my son. You're such a good child. I'm sure they would have been extremely reluctant to part with you. I'm sure that they're constantly thinking about you and searching for you. You still have loved ones in this world, so you'll never be lonely. Tang Xiran's body began to tremble, and so did his voice, but his gaze remained firmly locked on Tang Wuling. My son. If there's a next life, I only ask that the heavens make me your birth father. Lang's condition was also beginning to noticeably worsen. If there's a next life, we would never leave you. Even if you grow up to become a spoiled brat, we'd have no complaints. Tang Xiran took a deep breath, and it was clearly becoming difficult for him to speak. Don't be sad for us, my son. Your mother and I will still have each other on the other side, so we won't be lonely. We're just worried about you. You are our pride and joy, and we just want you to be happy. You've endured far too much during these past 12 years, and we're very ashamed of ourselves for not being able to provide you with a warm and loving home. Just remember this, if you want us to be happy on the other side, then the best thing you can do is live a happy life yourself. Seal. The Holy Spirit Douluo suddenly yelled, and dazzling white light erupted from the 8-winged angel projection behind her. The bright red color that had stained both Tang Xiran and Lang's bodies instantly receded, and they solidified into what appeared to be a pair of pristine white jade statues. Father. Mother. Tang Wuling let loose a heart-wrenching cry of grief before blacking out on the spot. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.